Task number 5. Improve the ATM experience. This is a great exercise for a live whiteboarding session. The task is phrased in a broad language to test how the candidate narrows down the problem. It can be taken in different directions depending on both candidate and the interviewer. It could be a complete redesign of how people interact with financial services, or redesigning just the UI of the ATM. I will suggest a solution that is somewhere in the middle. So let's start. The ATM is a great piece of technology, although I believe that the experience of using it has barely changed since it was invented. By improving it, we could have the next impact. Deliver a better financial service to customers, make them more likely to use our bank ATMs, make them more loyal to our bank, and expand our services to underserved audiences. All of this could result in an increased revenue for our bank. People using ATMs belong to all age groups, starting I assume at 13 when parents start giving their teenage children to use their cards. They also belong to all social classes, apart from the extremely low-income citizens. I assume that we are focusing on ATMs used in developed countries, where the majority of people from all social classes have debit or credit cards. When I think about more specific audiences, who might need a separate or unique approach, here are some that come to my mind. Senior citizens. Sometimes they're left underserved by digital products because they are not tech-savvy enough. Lowering the entry barrier for senior citizens using our ATM could make our product more appealing to them. Tourists or immigrants. They probably want to use the ATM in their native language, but they also want to better understand the exchange rate to their native currency and any fees that are relevant to using the ATM. Teenagers. They start interacting with money much earlier than they are legally allowed to have a bank account. I believe that there is opportunity to create solutions to serve their needs and educate them about finance. The disabled. I'm not sure how easily blind people or those with motor conditions are able to use ATMs. I assume that they can be served better. Here is the context in which people are using ATMs. A public place, during the day and night, noise on the street, weather conditions such as rain or snow, bright sunlight, a potential queue, feeling unsafe or suspicious. Here is a list of needs that the customer might have while using ATM. Withdrawing cash, I would assume it would be 80% of all ATM usages. Paying bills, such as utilities, phone bills, etc. Depositing checks or cash. Printing bank statements. Transferring money. Checking the balance, and other financial services. We can notice that some of the needs we just mapped out don't really require an ATM and could be performed on the bank's website or through a mobile app. We'll try to keep it in mind while thinking about solutions. I believe there are suboptimal conditions for using ATMs today that we have an opportunity to improve. For example, touching a dirty keyboard and screen, waiting in a queue, card fraud risk, requirement to own a credit card or debit card, requirement to have the card with you, remembering the PIN code, and the lack of accessibility to customers with disabilities. When I think about possible improvements for ATMs, here are some ideas that came to my mind. Interface redesign. Build a clearer and more efficient interface so we can reduce the queues, usage errors, and time spent by customers using the ATM. Cardless identification. Build fingerprint, face, or smartphone recognition into ATMs, so we can remove the entry barrier of owning or carrying card for using ATM services. For customers who already have a card, it would also become unnecessary to remember the PIN code. Idea number 3. Converting the ATM to a cash, deposit, or printing point. ATMs would only be required for the final step of physical transactions. For example, collecting the cash or printing statements, depositing checks, etc. All the requests and setup for these actions will be done on a smartphone in advance. Mobile app for children or teenagers. This would allow parents to give prepaid credits to their children. The children will be able to withdraw the amount their parents allowed, and being educated more about finance. This would introduce a new audience to the ATM. I will place the ideas on the impact effort matrix to assess their feasibility. The idea number 1, the interface redesign, is the quickest improvement we could ship, but it also wouldn't have a big impact. I like number 2 and 3 because they make owning a card unnecessary. It might not be in the bank's interest today, but it would definitely improve the customer's experience. It would also differentiate the bank from competitors. It also reduces the risk of card fraud, which is good both for customers and banks. I'm not sure about the regulatory aspect of idea number 4 involving children, so I would probably avoid using this idea for now. Idea number 3, converting the ATM to cash, deposit, and printing point, has the biggest impact. I believe it has several advantages. It removes the need of owning or carrying a card, minimizes interactions with the ATM, reduces queues, makes the ATM more accessible, and reduces card fraud. This is the idea that I will move forward with. Our experience will include 2 platforms: the smartphone, where the customer will perform the request, and the ATM, where they will collect or deposit the physical goods. Let me create a quick storyboard explaining how I see the user experience. So the customer will create the request on their smartphone, they will approach or navigate to the ATM, they will do the identification with smartphone, and collect or deposit the physical goods. Most banks already have mobile apps, so it wouldn't make sense for us to create a whole new mobile app. So our customers would have one app where they communicate with our bank. Here is a list of physical operations that could be requested on mobile and performed on ATM. Withdrawing cash, depositing checks and cash, printing bank statements. We could create entry points to these experiences from the relevant parts of our app. For example, the accountant statements in our mobile app can have a print button that will allow customers to print the bank statements. So once the customer taps print, they could be suggested to use the printer that is connected to the Wi-Fi network or an ATM to print it. In addition, the ATM experience will get a dedicated place in the app, for example, behind an ATM tab. Over time, we can learn about customers' habits and personalize the screen. For example, I assume most people withdraw the same amount of cash most of the time. So on this screen, we could suggest quick access to withdrawing this amount. Ideally, we would prefer customers to request the actions on their smartphone in advance. It will minimize their time in front of the ATM and reduce the queues. Our ATM machines will display a QR code that creates a handshake between mobile and the ATM. Once the request is transferred, the ATM will change its language according to the customer's smartphone language. After waiting for the ATM to process the request, all that is left is to collect or deposit the physical goods. When requests are saved for later, the request will appear on the home screen and the app's widget. In addition, the app will send a push notification once the customer is near to a bank's ATM. Mobile operation systems have built-in accessibility features, for example, voiceover or increased font size. It means that our solution will automatically make the ATM experience more accessible just by allowing customers to perform requests on their smartphone, because their smartphones already have much better accessibility support comparing to ATMs. Here are the metrics I would measure in order to understand if our redesign was successful. Churn rate. The percentage of customers who tried the new experience but returned to using the old ATM interface afterwards. Reduction in ATM queues. Decrease in requests to restore PIN codes. Reduction in card fraud. Adoption rate by people with disabilities.